Being sure you have a successful hip replacement surgery is your doctor's job. But oftentimes, having a successful recovery is up to you. Hi, I'm Pamela. 2 years ago, when I was 56, I had an anterior approach total hip replacement. My doctor's office really didn't give me very much information about what I should expect during the recovery phase after the surgery. They gave me a bunch of prescriptions for a bunch of different medications, including a bunch of different painkillers. They scheduled a 2-week checkup for me at their office, obviously 2 weeks after the surgery. And they also made arrangements for me to have 3 visits with a physical therapist at my house within those first 2 weeks. But other than that, I was kind of sort of on my own. I started this YouTube channel so I could share information with people like you about what it's like to live an active, vibrant life after having a total hip replacement, including what is it like to recover from that type of surgery. Subscribe to my channel now because you deserve to have that type of information that your doctor may not give to you. Speaking of doctors, I am not a doctor. I'm not any type of medical professional. And so what I'm sharing with you is my personal story with the hopes that when you have conversations with your medical professional, perhaps you can ask some better or different types of questions. Obviously, follow your medical professional's recommendations because they're the expert in what's going on with you. Everybody's recovery from their surgery is unique. But barring any type of big catastrophe, we all kind of follow some similar phases. Some people sail straight through recovery. Others have some pretty big setbacks. This video, though, should give you a general idea of what to expect. I'm starting with what I'm calling phase 1, which is really right when you wake up from anesthesia. I call this phase drugged, dopey, and dumb. Most likely, shortly after surgery, when you wake up from anesthesia, you're going to be expected to get up, get on your feet, get on your walker, and take a little stroll. For me, I had some type of nurse type person, and obviously I'm not a medical professional, so I don't know exactly what version of nurse type person that was. But what she did was she put this big belt around me and then also around her. And she used her body weight as leverage kind of to heave me out of the bed until I got into some type of standing position. Now, I was still really, really dopey from coming out of anesthesia, plus whatever types of painkillers they gave me, either while I was still under to prepare me for recovery afterwards or what was going on. So I was really dopey, but I do remember thinking, I have no business standing up at this point. And I'm not too sure if this lady is actually going to do a good job getting me onto my feet without me falling down. She did get me up on my feet, which was good because even though I hadn't had anything to drink since midnight the night before, I guess because of all the IVs they gave me, I really had to use the bathroom. So there I was at that point. She was kind of hanging on to the back of me. I was hanging onto my walker, trying to shuffle down to where the bathroom was, and I didn't quite make it to the bathroom. So I ended up peeing all over the floor in the surgical center. Now, as I was doing that, and she was standing right next to me, probably having her feet splashed, I looked at her and said, I just peed all over myself. Now, that's kind of why I added the dumb to this phase of recovery, because in retrospect, obviously, she knew I just peed all over myself because she was standing right there next to me. Fortunately, she got me kind of cleaned up. Didn't need to go to the toilet because that process was complete. She got me back into the bed. She got me cleaned up. And then she actually kind of tossed my clothing, my regular clothing at me and said, okay, it's time for you to get dressed. And so there I was kind of trying to put my shirt on. She helped me get my pants on. But that was kind of it. Because my surgery was at a surgical center, I didn't even spend the night there. Once I was dressed, they kind of got me into a wheelchair. They called my partner in, who was, of course, my ride home. They wheeled me out kind of the back door to where his car was. And then they kind of like, tipped me into the car. Now, my walker that I had all these strict instructions to bring with me, that was still in the back of the car. It was in the trunk because the walker that they used for me earlier in the adventure was kind of one that they just happened to have on standby. So they basically waved goodbye to me and, off we went to go home. My partner is very good in a crisis. He is career Army. He was in combat. If there's a zombie apocalypse, he's your guy. However, he's not a nurse. So there I am. Now we're finally home. He's trying to figure out how to get me out of the car. He's trying to get the walker out of the back of the trunk, position it in front of me. Should I be out the car door before I get into the walker? Should the walker be closer to me? How does all this stuff work? He and I were kind of trying to figure this out. And of course, I'm still dopey and dumb from all the medication that they gave me. Eventually, he gets me into the house and into the bed, which I was very happy to be in that bed. Later on that afternoon, I had to kind of like hail him back over and say, okay, I need to go to the bathroom again. Fortunately, he helped me get to the bathroom, and I did make it on time that time. But still, it was really difficult for me to navigate. How do I get the walker into the bathroom door? My house is not a brand new house, and so it's not necessarily wheelchair accessible. And even though I had my walker and not a wheelchair, it was still kind of tricky to get that in because the doorway wasn't quite wide enough. I did have the anterior surgery, meaning the incision was on the front of my thigh, but I still kind of was really confused about how do I turn around? How do I sit down? The doctor's office had sent over to me a couple of days before the surgery a portable commode, which was basically had like a bucket with a lid on it and a framework that you could put your arms on. The day before the surgery, I kind of got rid of the bucket and was able to position the frame right on top of my toilet. So that way, at least I had arms that I could push myself up on when it came time for me to get off the toilet. That was super helpful for me. If you had the posterior approach of your hip replacement surgery, where the incision is on the back, definitely talk to your doctor before the surgery and ask them about, how does it work if you need to sit down and use the toilet, just to be sure that you've got good information on that. The next morning, I woke up feeling significantly better. And I was very surprised because the love of my life, who I will call G.I. Joe here, actually decorated my walker with Christmas lights because I had my surgery in the middle of December, which of course was right before Christmas. So that was a fun treat and a nice surprise that he had for me. He helped me get back into the walker, and I just kind of like shuffled along into the family room area and managed to somehow kind of lean back and get myself on the couch. Because of the painkillers I was on in that phase 1 of my recovery, I didn't really have a whole lot of pain, certainly no sharp pain. What I did have was a real strong ache right where the incision was on my thigh. What I had done in advance was I got some ice packs. Those were staged in the freezer, and my partner would go and get the ice packs for me. I'd lay them on the incision. I'm not usually a big fan of putting ice on anything because I tend to get chilly. And even though it was December, I was really, really grateful to have those ice packs simply because they seemed to just kind of numb some of the aching that I had in that first day or two after my surgery. Those first couple of days, I basically sat on the couch, watched television, fell asleep while I was watching television. My partner did a really great job ensuring that at least I stood up and made a little bit of a lap around the family room pretty much every hour or so, just kind of to keep the juices flowing in my system. And he did a good job being sure that I had my pain medication on time, which then took me to phase 2 of recovery. I call phase 2 the Weak and wobbly phase. My insurance covered 3 visits at my house with a physical therapist. The first visit, I think, was on the 3rd day after my surgery. So kind of again, I felt like they just kind of like left me hanging. Didn't really know what it was I was supposed to be doing. But he was fantastic. He spent about an hour at my house every visit. And I realized that was actually much more time I had with any medical professional, other than I suppose the actual surgery itself. And so he was great about answering all the questions that I had. My partner had some questions for him. Basically, the physical therapist was there to check my blood pressure, see how I was feeling in general, answer any questions that I had. He wanted me to be up on my feet. We practiced kind of marching in place. He watched me kind of push my walker around the family room a little bit. But he was super, super helpful for me during that kind of weak and wobbly stage of my recovery. About a week after surgery, when I was kind of still in that weak and wobbly phase, I started having some bruising in my lower leg, which I thought was really strange. I would have thought that I would have had this big, massive bruise where the incision was on my hip, but really had very little bruising there. So when these random bruises started showing up below that, I was kind of freaked out. And the physical therapist let me know that that was something that is normal and perfectly expected, simply because the blood starts draining towards the bottom of your leg. He gave me a lot of reassurances that that was perfectly fine. So I was super healthy, super happy that he was there during that phase of my recovery. Also, the physical therapist removed kind of the big, thick white padding that was on top of my incision. What was left once he took that off was the actual incision with what looked to me like a big piece of heavy duty plastic wrap, the type of wrap that you would put over your food when you wanted to store it in the refrigerator or something like that. That was waterproof. So once the big white cottony type dressing was gone, then I was actually able to take a shower. Waiting until that dressing was gone was in part of the instructions that the doctor's office gave me as far as recovering from the surgery. What they didn't really get into is, how do I actually take this shower? My shower has a little bit of a ledge that you have to kind of like step over in order to get inside the shower. I did have a shower bench that I had intentionally positioned kind of like in the middle of my shower because I thought sitting down might be a little bit easier for me. I have a handheld sprayer on my shower. And so my partner kind of took that down. He got the bench right for me. He kind of helped me get in to sit on the bench. And there I was, kind of like, with a shower handle, kind of trying to wash myself. I found that sitting down actually wasn't the easiest way for me to take my shower, mostly because the parts that I really wanted to wash the most were the parts that I was actually sitting on when I was sitting on that shower bench. After the first couple of showers, I ended up pushing that shower bench aside, or asking my partner to push that shower bench aside, and actually just kind of going into the shower with my metal walker. It has kind of, cushiony legs on it. I never put the tennis balls on it like you see a lot of people do. But I found that standing up was actually easier for me. I could balance on my walker, and that was better for me than having to sit down on the bench, get back up off the bench to get out of the shower. I also had previously put up some suction cup kind of wall grabber things. Now, I knew, because they were just suction cups and they weren't permanently installed in my shower walls, that they would never hold my body weight. But I found that they were good for me to feel a little bit more like I had some balance when I was standing up. In fact, one of them, 2 years later, I still keep in the shower simply because why not? But I found that to be super helpful. In the notes to this video, I'll actually put a couple of links to different things that I found helpful for me during this recovery process, including those kind of like suction cup grab bars that were really easy to put on and actually easy to take off of your shower. Each day during the weakened wobbly stage of my recovery, I was starting to feel a little bit better. I was napping a lot during the day. Everything that I did was exhausting. I was still taking my painkillers, and so that was definitely contributing to me wanting to nap during the day. It may have been contributing to the exhaustion. Although, don't forget that whole process of going through that type of surgery, it takes a big toll on your body. And so I was happy that I had the opportunity to have somebody helping me out during the day. So that way I could just take those random naps 5 or 6 times during the day. During one of the visits with a physical therapist, I don't remember if it was the second or the third, he told me to stop using the walker and to start using the cane that was also sent to me before the surgery. Now, this is where I hear a huge variety in instructions that people have for their hip replacement. So be sure that you are following whatever instructions your medical professional gives you. Just because my physical therapist had me off the walker and on a cane in just a week or so, that does not mean that is right for you. Be sure you listen to your own medical professional. Next, I transitioned to phase 3 of the recovery, which I call it the fog is lifting. I was taking very little in terms of painkillers during the day. I was still taking them at night, but at least during the day, because I wasn't all drugged up and dopey, I was feeling more like my own self, certainly mentally. I had kind of a hard time getting used to the cane. Um, I had surprised myself by getting very attached to the walker, which I didn't think I would at all whatsoever. But the cane, for whatever reason, I never really bonded with the cane. I found I was always dropping it. It was always on the floor. It was always in the way. I was worried people were going to trip out over it. It kind of folded to a smaller distance, but whenever I wanted to kind of fold it down, I had it up in my arms and I felt like, the cane was swinging all over the place. And one day I found myself standing in front of the refrigerator and I realized I didn't have my cane with me. I had left the cane over by the couch. And for whatever reason, I just kind of got up and walked over to the refrigerator and didn't think about it. So that point was kind of the end of my relationship with the cane at home. That's when I entered the phase of my recovery I call fragile freedom. Well, I certainly used the cane when I was about outside the house, and I used it a lot for walking around my neighborhood. Inside my house, I had enough chairs and countertops that I felt pretty comfortable kind of walking from one place to another with my hands on one of those items for balance. It was during that fragile freedom phase of my recovery that my partner took me out to lunch a couple of times. The big treat I had during this fragile freedom phase, which is kind of hard to say, was he took me to the grocery store. Now, under normal circumstances, going to the grocery store is by no means a treat for me. But what was nice about it was we pulled straight into a parking spot. There was a grocery cart or trolley or buggy or whatever you want to call it. He brought that right around to my side of the car. I got out of the car. Instead of holding on to my walker or my cane, I was able to hold on to the grocery cart. And so I just kind of pushed the grocery cart into the grocery store, walked around a little bit, and I felt for the first time since my surgery kind of like a real normal person. Now, I couldn't squat down or reach anything off the bottom shelf, but I didn't have to because he did all that stuff for me. But it gave me a little bit of a sense of independence simply by having that grocery cart to hang on to. I think of the different phases of the recovery. This is the one where I was intentionally trying to be the most careful. I knew that because I was walking reasonably well for somebody who had had hip replacement surgery, I wanted to be sure that I wasn't getting overly confident. I knew my bones were still healing. I knew my muscles were still kind of trying to figure out how to navigate the new geometry of my body. The problem that I did have during this phase was if I was too active during the day, maybe I went to lunch and the grocery store in kind of the same outing, at some point my leg would start to feel really achy. Even on days where I wasn't overly active and I felt fine when I went to bed, almost every night I would wake up in the middle of the night with my leg having this deep, painful ache. It wasn't a sharp pain like something was jabbing me, but it was just this dull, almost kind of burning ache in my leg. When I talked to the people at my doctor's office about this, they just prescribed more painkillers for me. And sure, if I took the painkillers, it would help me sleep through the night. But then in the morning when I woke up, I still had this deep burning pain. Finally, after a good month of me complaining about this to the people at my doctor's office, I finally just stopped taking the pain pills. The reason why I stopped taking those pills at night, I stopped taking them during the day because I didn't need them, but I stopped taking them at night because I found that I really liked taking them at night. I slept so well. And so I started to get a little bit worried about it because I wanted to be sure I didn't develop a dependency or an addiction to these types of, really major painkillers. I call them the oxys. I wanted to be sure I didn't have a problem with that going into the future. So I finally just kind of weaned myself off of those. What that meant, though, was virtually every night I would wake up 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning with that deep burning sensation in my leg. I would just get out of bed. I found that if I moved my body just a little bit, again, just kind of getting the juices flowing, that seemed to kind of ease some of that pain. Sometimes I just kind of walk around the house. Sometimes I just kind of pace in place. One time I got on the stationary bike that we have here in our house. Other times I would just make my way out to the couch, sit down maybe with my feet up on the coffee table and watch television. Either I'd fall asleep on the couch and wake up later, or sometimes I would just stay awake. And when my honey woke up, it was coffee time, I'd just start my day. Eventually, I got to stage 5 of the recovery, which is what I call return to greatness. Eventually, I kind of realized I wasn't waking up in the middle of the night with that deep throbbing pain anymore. It had kind of sort of just gone away. I also realized I wasn't really thinking about my hip anymore. I didn't have to think about how am I going to get into the shower. I didn't think about it being a problem getting into the car. I just didn't think about my hip as I navigated my world. Ultimately, that should be the end goal for all of us that have hip replacements. This was my path to recovery. Obviously, everybody's path is unique. If you've had or are planning a total hip replacement, I wish you the best of luck with your recovery. If you'd like to learn more about what actions you can take to live a fulfilling and vibrant life well into the future, click the subscribe button. That way, you won't miss any of my upcoming videos. See you next time.